Yeah, I like UConn here. I am making no bones about it. They have been the most dominant team in the regular season. They've been the most dominant team in the NCAA tournament. They've won every single game by at least 10 points. When they win, they usually win big. Even in that Alabama game where Alabama was very much making a run at things and they were making their shots, and UConn's defense actually didn't look that great in the first half. They put the clamps down in the second half and really put the gas pedal down. Because that's the thing about UConn. It feels like their rotation is so deep. I believe they have a 7-man rotation where it's not just one guy. They can beat you in so many ways. And if you look at KenPom, what's their weakness? They don't have one. If you
No,
look
they
at
don't.
Purdue, obviously the matchup is going to be, can you stop Zach Edey? Even though I don't think you have to stop him. I think Zach Edey can get his points, he can get his rebounds, but as long as you limit his trips to the free throw line, I think you certainly have a puncher's chance of defeating this team squarely, because as much as the guard play has been improved this season, like I think that's the biggest difference between this Purdue team and the team that was knocked out very early on in the NCAA tournament is that the guard play is older, more experienced, and they've been better. But we saw some cracks in the armor last time against NC State. This team had 16 turnovers. They're playing really sloppy for a team that's this deep in March, or April, I should say. It's April 8th. But still, some credit should be given to NC State's defense. But I think there is a pathway to beat Purdue soundly. And all around, I still think UConn is the much better squad.
There's just no question about it. And I don't know what the weakness is for UConn. They
There's
can
not
come
one.
out. They're just not. The weakness is the same weakness that every team has in every game, which is maybe they come out and maybe they just go ice cold. Like maybe just no one can hit a shot. I just don't see that happening. UConn can beat you in so many different ways. So if I told you that Donovan Clingan had a big night, you'd believe it. If I told you that Tristan Newton had a fantastic night, running up and down the court, you'd believe it. If I told you that Cam Spencer was hitting a ton of threes, he had a big night, you'd believe it. Now, if I told you that Zach Edey struggled from the field for Purdue, guess what? You'd be like, uh-oh, that's a problem for Purdue. Zach Edey has to perform and he has to get help, and he just doesn't have the help that the Huskies have. If Purdue's going to beat you, it has to be Zach Edey. If UConn's going to beat you, pick your poison. It's however they want to do it. And so as great as it has been to see Purdue make this run after last year's disappointment, and it's awesome to see 2 number 1 seeds, 2 of the best teams going at it, UConn is just in a different class. And in today's day and age in college basketball, it really is rare to have a collection of talent like this, where you have some older guys, some younger guys. This is kind of old school, right? Where you have a team that has a lot of experience. Carolina was like that before they got eliminated, which is why I like them going into the tournament. But now, because of how quickly guys move through the sport, it's rare to have a collection of guys like this. But UConn has done it, and that's why they've dominated, and that's why they're on the cusp of back-to-back titles. I just don't see any way they go down tonight.
So we haven't asked you outright, are you on UConn? And what is the case for UConn?
If I were to make a bet tonight at 6.5, I would have bet UConn. And actually, as I'm saying this now, my board, I don't know what it is about my board right now, but it's lighting up with some UConn money here. I just saw MGM go to 7.5. So we are seeing some UConn money kind of flood the market this morning. I do think at some point Purdue will get some buyback here, but I would bet UConn at 6.5. I wouldn't bet them at 7. You know, the key numbers in college basketball, 2, 3, 5, and 7. So once you get past 7, it's really starting to look like this number's getting stretched. The way that I played this, so, I mean, you guys remember when we did the show a couple weeks ago, like I've been high on Purdue this pretty much whole season. I had a ticket on them at 9-1 from back in January. So when Purdue and UConn both got into the Final Four, I thought to myself, all right, it's looking pretty obvious now that it's going to be a Purdue-UConn final. What's the way to come off of this? So I bet a UConn over Purdue exacta at -120. So I've got UConn at -120. I've got Purdue at 9-1. I don't need to play the game in any capacity on the side perspective, but I do think at 6.5 there's value on UConn. At 7, not so much. The total's intriguing because we've seen it bet down pretty considerably, 148.5 now 145.5. To your point, Chelsea, the turnovers for Purdue were alarming. And not only the 16 turnovers, but who committed them. it was Braden Smith, who's their main point guard, who's obviously the guy that runs the engine, and it was Zach Edey, who is, the guy that's going to have the ball in his hands for most of the time, besides Braden Smith. Those two combined for 10 of the 16 turnovers. So the two people touching the ball the most were the sloppiest with the ball, and that scares me because UConn is so good at taking you out of whatever you do best. And that's why I don't think they're going to double Zach Edey. And that's why I think they're going to, Donovan Clingan will be hopeful that he can hang. But here's the key for UConn. How does Purdue play and how does Zach Edey play? There's probably going to be about 5 to 8 minutes of this game where Clingan's not on the floor. He only averages about 28 minutes a game. He had 29 against Bama. He's only reached 30 once since December. He's usually in the mid to maybe slightly upper 20s. Edey's a 35, 40-minute guy. He played 40 minutes against NC State. So there's going to be a 5-minute stretch at least where Edey's on the floor and Clingan's not. Now, maybe Clingan plays more tonight. Last game of the year, what are you saving him for? But can Purdue make up significant ground if Edey does get a 5-minute stretch without Clingan where he can go off for 5-10 points? That, to me, is probably the X factor in the game. Like, if and on the other side, if UConn can drastically outplay Purdue with Clingan on the bench and hold their own for that 5-minute stretch, they probably cover the number. So, keep an eye on when Clingan goes to the bench and how often he goes to the bench. Keep an eye on foul trouble. Purdue doesn't foul a whole lot, but Clingan's a guy that has been known to get in foul trouble before. So those are some X factors tonight that probably will tip the scales that most likely are not being baked into the number.
UConn can afford to miss one of their players and still thrive. If Zach Edey is out for Purdue, they're done. They're toast. He is that team. So, and he dominated again. That's a crazy thing is that even when everyone else went cold, not Zach Edey, he's just in there on the inside, attracting attention, creating open shots for his teammates by virtue of the fact that he commands so much of the attention, whether it's a double team, triple team, whatever, and he continues to get it done. Every now and then he gets some help from the old officials. You'll touch him and they'll say, that's a foul, but there's no denying his talent. I got to go with Zach Edey.
We're not going to say anything about South Carolina ending the season a perfect 39-0 and winning a national championship. MVP of the weekend has to go to South Carolina women's basketball. What a season. And Jenks, you brought this up earlier. It's the second season in a row where they've looked downright perfect. What was it? They lost in the national championship game last year. So they had one loss on the season. What a stretch of dominance from the Gamecocks. I feel like I got to give it to them here. It shows a lot, not only to win a national title, but to do it in perfection. This means that you have the consistency throughout the season to stay focused, to keep the blinders on, and even against those teams with nothing to lose. When you're South Carolina, the target is always on your back. So they've had to bring their A game every single game of the year, and they came out unblemished. So MVP of the weekend for me has to be South Carolina women's basketball.